Alright, this video is about sport fighting versus street fighting. Somebody wrote me a message today and I want to just reflect on that message. He said it's good to agree, it's good to listen to a topic that have the same thoughts and views on the reality of the UFC fighting versus street fighting. He says it's been a long time Wing Chun martial arts for many years. And he says, found with his training experiences that street fights are more realistic concerning being able to fully utilize one's skills, with no rules or padding or a ref, and most importantly, no time limits. I agree with their stance on the realities of sport versus street. Yes, the UFC has great athletes, but to me, I sincerely believe that the champions are truly champions of the rings and not the street. So I just want to reflect on that. And this is what I want to bring up, is that anytime when there's a lot of money involved, you're going to find very talented athletes involved in that sport. Something even swimming, when you're swimming at the level of the Olympics and they're fighting for that Olympic gold medal, you're talking about they're competing for millions of sponsorship, if they win. They might not be they're getting a gold medal, but that entails receiving millions of dollars of sponsorship. So then swimming ends up becoming, some of the top-notch athletes that you'll find when it comes to the Olympic level. Any sport, professional level, basketball, you're going to find the top-level athletes in the NBA. Baseball, football, top-level athletes wherever money is involved. So the UFC just recently got sold for $4-point-something billion. So obviously there's a lot of money there. So because there's so much money involved, you're going to see very athletic people involved in cage fighting. Just like you see very athletic people involved in pro boxing, professional boxing. But just because there's a lot of athletic people involved in a sport doesn't make the sport reality combat. It's still limited by the rules governed within that sport. There's still something beyond the sport, and that's real street combat, with or without weapons. But if you want to take the weapons out of the equation, there's still a lot of differences in unarmed street combat versus sport fighting. And these differences are not subtle differences, they're major differences. As far as no gender discrimination, as far as no weight class separation, as far as no class, age class separation, as far as no separation between skill level, no separation between height level, no separation. It's like there's no time limits, as the person stated. There's no referee. There's no combat gloves. There's no mouth guards. There's no rules on what you can and can't do. I'm reading the Tao Jeet Kune Do, I'm reading it over again, and a lot of the techniques he's talking about when it comes to the ground fighting, a lot of it is hitting the person in the groin area. And that's something that's completely banned from all combat sports. And that's just one example. There's other examples like striking, doing kicks directly to a person's kneecap to break their knee. There's chops to the throat where you could kill them in an instant. There's eye jabs where you could just blind them with one hit. There's just so many different things that you could do in real combat on the streets that you just are not allowed to do in the sport. Just like in football, you just can't do whatever you want to do to your opponent. You gotta tackle them legally. In basketball, you gotta defend, you gotta play defense in a legal way. You can't just start throwing elbows and throwing knees and start shoving people and tripping people. You can't just do whatever you want to do to prevent the person from scoring. And it's the same thing with boxing, same thing with cage fighting. Yes, cage fighting may appear to have less rules than boxing, but if you look deeper into it, there are an immense amount of rules that are governing what can and cannot happen within that cage. They're not even allowed to spit on each other. They're not even allowed to swear at each other and disrespect each other verbally. They're obviously not allowed to bite each other. Mike Tyson tried to bite Evander Holyfield's ear in the boxing ring, and obviously they didn't allow that. In boxing, they don't let you hit a person when they're on the ground. In cage fighting, they do allow you to do it, but at the same time, if the ref feels that the person is already, has suffered enough, then the ref will step in and stop it. And you're not allowed to stomp on the opponent. Bruce Lee's talking about stomping on the opponent, stomping in their groin area, stomping on their temple, punting their head like it's a football. I mean, you can't do that in cage fighting. There's just a lot of things that you cannot do in combat sport that you're free to do out there in the streets. And even on the streets, you may be fighting on the street where it's concrete. You might be fighting on a sidewalk where it's concrete, and you drop a person, you body slam a person on their head, there's a good chance that they're just going to die instantly. You snap their neck, you crack their head open. I mean, it's serious business on the streets. Like, it's no joke. The type of damage that they're taking within the cage, they would not be able to survive that type of damage on the streets. Getting body slammed onto the concrete would not fly too well on the streets. So I'm simply indicating that there's something, the purity of combat is beyond the combat sport. The combat sport is designed to make money and to entertain people. I just saw a video with Mayweather talking about him making over $300 million in one boxing match, and I believe that match was against Pacquiao. It's all about making money. People will gravitate towards where they could go to make the most amount of money and to get the most amount of fame. So if a person can make more money boxing, then that's what he's going to do. If a person's going to make more money cage fighting than street fighting, then usually that's what he's going to do. If a person's going to make more money being in Hollywood, then that's what he's going to do. And you see a lot of these cage fighters transition from the cage into Hollywood, like Kung Lee and the Randy Couture and the GSP and the Ronda Rousey. It seems like almost every single cage fighter that is very successful finds their way into Hollywood to make money making movies. So people would rather make movies to make money than jump into the cage to make money. If a person can make money boxing, make $100 million boxing a year, he'd rather do that than to step in the cage and only make $2 million a year. It just doesn't make sense. It's like the basketball player who's playing for his team and he's only getting paid $5 million, but another team offers him $30 million. Obviously, he's going to go towards the other team that's offering him $30 million. Now, when it comes to martial arts, it comes to street fighting, you're training out of pure passion and just survival. It's not about the money. You don't even make money for the most part. If anything, you spend money. And there are people out there like that who are not making any money, but they train in the lethal techniques of combat because that's just a part of what they love to do. Just like there's people out there that go to the gun range consistently. Like, they're not making any money. They're just buying guns. They're spending money on guns. They're spending money on bullets. They're spending money on getting the gun license. They're spending money for range time. They're spending all this money to get good with guns, but they're not making any money. But there's people out there like that who are trained with the guns, who are not afraid to protect their lives with the guns. And there are people out there who train in the real martial arts where it really has no rules, and that's what they train in. And they even might spend money to join a martial arts school to train in these techniques. And they're not making money, they're spending money to train in techniques that are truly lethal. And then there's the people who want to get into combat sport to get money, to get fame, and they are spending their time to try to make it to the professional level within that sport. But some of them might be talented, and of course, like I said, if there's a lot of money involved, of course you're going to find talented athletes because there's so much at stake. But that still does not mean that it's the pure science of fighting on the streets. It's still not the ultimate. They might have talented athletes within that sport, but it is still not the ultimate as far as the science of real street fighting. And who are the individuals that are representing the real street combat? Well, a famous person is Bruce Lee. He was all about studying the science of real combat on the streets. And then non-famous people may be some of these police officers out there, who are truly putting their lives at risk every time they go out there on duty. They're dealing with real guns and real violence. Others are maybe people that have concealed carry, and they carry the gun with them everywhere, and they're ready to take care of business if the time comes. Other people, maybe the people that are in the army or the Marines, or that are soldiers. They're training in real weapons, lethal weapons, to prepare for combat. And this is the reality that there's people out there like that. And there are people out there that train in what Bruce Lee was training in, the science of real street fighting, but they're just not famous. But they train in it, and they get good at it. And that is the ultimate, when you don't limit yourself to any rules. You don't let a sport come in there and say you can and you can't do this. You do what you need to do to survive that dangerous encounter. And that's what separates the difference between people that practice martial arts opposed to people who practice combat sport. Yes, there's a lot of people representing combat sport that are very athletic and talented, including Mayweather, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, some of these successful cage fighters, some of these successful Muay Thai fighters, some of these successful kickboxers. There's a lot of athletes representing combat sport, and there's not that many very athletic people representing martial arts because there's just no money involved. There's minimal money involved. You're talking about an athlete who's making millions and millions of dollars compared to martial artists who might be having a problem making a few $1,000s a year. But you got to give credit to the martial artists out there that they're practicing the real science. The combat sport people are not practicing the real science. They're practicing an impurified version of street combat. It's been severely diluted with an immense amount of rules and regulations, and they have adapted to those rules and regulations in order to put themselves in a position where they can make money, get fame. So then they have sacrificed the integrity of the martial arts to make money, get fame, and that's what they have done. But then there are people out there that stay true to the integrity of the real martial arts, and they wish to represent that. And a lot of these people are individuals that are just hidden, and they live like private lives, where just like there's people out there that have concealed carry and you don't know who it is. You don't know how old they are. You don't know how long they've been training with the guns, but they're like lethal people, and they are ready to take care of business if that time comes. And they're out there. and the government doesn't even allow them to identify themselves as individuals that are armed, at least not in Chicago. If you have a concealed carry, you got to keep it concealed. So there's martial artists out there that just don't even identify themselves, where they train in the arts, but nobody knows. But they're the ones who train in the real arts that are not restricted, you know. And that's one thing that I just want to make it very clear when people identify themselves as a martial artist, that they kind of have a better idea of what they're communicating to the public. Because how can you be a martial artist when you're competing within this sport? If you're competing within this sport, then you're more of a fighter, a competitor, opposed to an artist. An artist is not bound by the rules a fighter is bound by. An artist is free to create and express. So a martial artist is somebody that studies the science of street combat. A fighter studies, studies the methods of sport fighting under the rules governed within that sport. And I think it's just important for people to properly understand which one they're representing. Just like right now with the presidential election, there's a Republican and Democrat. Like, don't claim yourself to be both. Choose one to represent. So you're either representing the martial arts or you represent combat sport. You can't represent both. You got to choose one. And that's pretty much what I'm identifying. Combat sport people have all the fame, they have all the money, but don't be mistaken to believe that they also have the science of street combat. They don't have the science. The science of street combat belongs to the martial arts. The martial arts doesn't have the money, it doesn't have the fame, but it has the science. And don't try to take that away from them, because they own that. Everything that combat sport is based off of the martial arts. They took everything that they have from the martial arts, and they created this game to entertain people with. But do not mistakenly believe that it is the foundation. Combat sport is not the foundation. Martial arts is the foundation. And when you claim yourself as a martial artist, that means that you are true to the foundation and to the integrity of the martial arts, and that's what you wish to represent. It's something beyond the combat sport.